We are just weeks away from the release of Batman Caped Crusader Season 2, and a very insightful interview has just been published in Animation Magazine's July/August issue, and it has this really striking cover featuring some of the main villains of the show. So I've gone through this article. I'll share a link to it in the description as well, so you can read it for yourself. But here are some of the biggest revelations from the interview. I've got about 10 points, so let's go through them quickly. So the first thing I want to say is that there is a big creative team shakeup. We all knew that Ed Brubaker, who was the head writer on Season 1 and one of my favourite comic book writers, I might add, was occupied working on his show Criminal, and so he wasn't able to come back for Caped Crusader Season 2. So they had to get a new head writer. But before I get to that, there are also some other changes near the top. So the big change is that Bruce Timm has shifted his focus to other projects. And that doesn't mean he's not involved at all, it just means he's focusing elsewhere. And to be honest, the guy's been working on Batman media for, nearly 40 years. It wouldn't surprise me if he needed a change of pace or a bit of a breather. But what this means is that James Tucker has stepped up to take on a much larger supervisory role. And the next point I have is around who the new head writer is, and this is a man named Geoffrey Thorne. Now, he's a former actor turned writer. He does have a background in writing comics. He's done a fair bit of work for Marvel, primarily writing Black Panther, if I remember correctly, and he's written some Green Lantern stuff for DC. And he notes in this interview that he has over 50,000 comic books in his collection, which is quite a feat because, I think I've got a ton. I've had to get a storage unit to keep mine in, and I think I've probably got close to maybe 20,000. So the dude clearly has some credentials, right? And he says quite a few interesting things. I'll get to some of his main points in a minute because there was one little bit of news in here that made me jump for joy. And that is that they are introducing title cards for every episode again. So you'll remember when Caped Crusader Season 1 came out that Warner Brothers released on social media some mock-up title cards for each episode. Well, this time they're actually officially getting them back, and they've been described as like the 1940s black and white movies title cards. I'm really looking forward to seeing those. Some of my favourite things about Batman the Animated Series were the title cards. I had the pleasure of meeting Eric Radomski and John Calmette, who worked on most of the title cards at Anaheim Fan Expo recently, and I sat down and talked with them for hours. So I'm really excited about this. So next, James Tucker talked a fair amount about his influences on this series. So with Bruce Timm stepping back, James Tucker is steering the visual ship. Now you may find yourself saying, well, hang on a minute, who's this James Tucker fella? He has had a long history on working on DC cartoons. He started out as a storyboard artist on Superman the Animated Series and Batman Beyond. He became a director during Batman Beyond, and I believe a producer for Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. And obviously his main claim to fame, well, maybe obvious to me, is Batman the Brave and the Bold. That was his show. He's talked about with this season, his main influences are the earliest Batman comics from the Golden Age. And he talks about taking artistic influence from people like Jerry Robinson and Dick Sprang, as well as Dick Tracy creator Chester Gold. So I think we can expect a more heavy comic book noir influence, much in the same way that Brave and the Bold was influenced by the Silver Age. And my fifth point there is around the darker, horror-infused tone. Because one of the things about these Golden Age comics is that they were often about murders and supernatural threats. And James Tucker and Geoffrey Thorne talk about how their mandate for Season 2 was to just escalate everything. They wanted things to be darker, more action, more like film noir, more horrific. And I think we kind of got a teaser of that in the trailer because it seemed, I swear, every other shot was someone firing a Tommy gun into the distance or an explosion. So yeah, I think they've taken some of the feedback from criticism of the first season and they've made some efforts to change it. So in terms of the end of Season 1, where Batman's emotional shift happened and he stopped calling Alfred Pennyworth, he started calling him Alfred, and there was that shot at the end where he's standing on the building as the lightning strikes, evoking the title sequence of Batman the Animated Series. So what they're saying is in this season is that character-wise, Batman has officially moved past his year 1.5 phase. And Geoff Thorne notes that Bruce will be slightly, and let's really emphasize the word slightly, more emotionally available this season as he navigates a changing Gotham. And one of the big changes there is this version of the Joker. So the writers are treating Batman's growth as a good thing because it allows the villains to become even more extreme. If you've got like a really dark, dour, depressing Batman, then that kind of takes the edge off of these nasty villains, right? I guess that's the argument they're making. Whereas if you make Batman a little lighter, a little bit more optimistic, a little bit more, as they said, emotionally open. You can have these more extreme villains, and it makes them just stand out a bit more. They talked a lot about how the driving arc of the season will push Batman into a major confrontation with the deadly, reimagined version of the Joker, and they do say that they've come up with quite a good novel change to Joker. Again, you'll see from all of the pre-release material, he is shrouded in shadow. You can't see his face. They have done something to his face. I mean, I've speculated about this before. It could be that his face is massively scarred up and twisted and contorted and horrible. Could be that he can't smile at all. And one of the images that was released with this article that I absolutely love is a shot of the Joker standing on top of a building completely in shadow. Now, this is meant to mirror the end of Caped Crusader Season 1, where Batman is lit up by the lightning strike. It just really drums home like the parallels between them and how they are kind of being treated as like two sides of the same coin, but one is admittedly dark but kind of lighter versus someone completely in shadow. And I think that leads quite nicely into my next point. They've upgraded the animation and the post-production efforts, I suppose. They've basically worked harder to step up the quality of the animation from Season 1. They've brought in a studio from Italy called Doghead Animation, who are working alongside Studio Grida. Grida or Grida? I think it's Grida. Visually, they've added a lot more heavy shadows and vignettes during post-production to kind of really emphasize their German expressionism influence. And yeah, that was probably my main complaint about Season 1 of Caped Crusader, is that the animation was fine. You know, it was okay, but there was nothing to write home about. There was no moment like the midnight chase through Gotham City skyline, I should say, during On Leather Wings in Batman the Animated Series. It was just fine. There were a couple of little flourishes here and there that I really liked. There was that shot in the episode where Onomatopoeia is hired to kill Barbara Gordon. Batman is in the cell with the guy that arranged the hit, and the guy tries to stab him. Batman holds up the Bible. The guy's knife gets stuck in it. Then once he's disarmed, Batman just punches him in the face a bunch of times. I don't know why that shot sticks with me, but I think it's really cool. But anyway, so I'm really pleased to hear that they've taken the feedback around the animation on board. And the last point I want to share, and this one is, I think, actually more significant than perhaps people realize, is that while this show is episodic and you can just watch the individual episodes and it will be fine, it's actually been written as a novel. So because it's only 10 episodes, they've treated them like individual chapters in an overall season-wide novel, as they say, where every single episode is a continuous tight chapter rather than a complete standalone adventure. That's kind of why they've just released it in one go. It's certainly one of the reasons why they've done it. So that, like a book, if you want to sit down and read through it all in one go, you can. If you want to break it into chunks and do it that way, you can. Speaking as someone that's found the episodic or near episodic release of X-Men 97 absolutely excruciating and infuriating, I really appreciate the approach they're taking. But that's a matter for another time. But anyway, as I said, I've linked to the article in the description below. Go ahead and read it yourself. Share your thoughts about the creative team changes. I gather that Jeffrey Thorne worked on some of the Ben 10 cartoons as well, so I've never really watched Ben 10, but I gather there's a lot of crossover with DC Animated Universe fans, so hey, let me know what you think in the comments below, as ever. Keep it classy. Bye-bye.